Out of our normal agenda. It is such a treat and an honor to be with you guys. I've spoken to this group a couple of times, but it's usually been the smaller group, so I'm glad I didn't know it was going to be so large. I probably would have gotten a little nervous, but thank you for being here. Thank you for what you're doing day in, day out to strengthen your children's education and to prepare them for being just the amazing people that they were designed to be. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Yvette Diaz. I work for the same network that Joshua Shee works for at Bridge to Wellbeing, and I am the foundation director for the Libre Institute. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that really wants to see the Hispanic community thrive and contribute to a thriving country. And so we believe, our tagline is that freedom drives progress. And so that definitely applies to education as well. We believe that the more freedom that parents have, that children have, just the more opportunities they're going to have to really be able to develop their potential and reach their American dream. So my background with children and education comes from a non-parent perspective. I taught junior high for a year, and I also worked at my parenting stint began at 24 years old. I was working at an at-risk facility, I guess, a facility. It was a 500-acre farm in Texas. So I am like this LA girl that went to Texas all of a sudden and jumped into farm life. But I worked with teens who had been deemed at risk and lived with 8 girls in my home, and then got tapped to work with the boys as well. So I survived a lot of Axe body spray and and football plays with salt shakers and whatnot. So that was kind of my intro into it for a little bit, but I'm not yet fortunate to be a mother. However, I am passionate about kids, passionate about education, and really just excited. Probably nothing excites me more than parents who are just dedicated to their children. Last time I was here, I shared a little bit about my why. I was homeschooled from K through 12. 2 months into my kindergarten career, my mom decided that she really felt it best to be the one who was primarily in charge of my education. It really hit me hard this week, the sacrifices that my parents made so that we could have that educational opportunity when they just retired this week. They announced that they would be retiring at the end of the month. And I was talking to my brothers about it, and I said, I know that if they had not made that sacrifice for us, they would probably be retiring at a very different level. They were one income, one car, a lot of sacrifices, and I know that they would probably be at a different place, a lot more cushy, a lot more luxurious. And so the best thing that we can do as siblings, obviously, is to honor that sacrifice and make the most of it so that it doesn't go to waste. Another one of my whys is actually more on the somber note. I actually will be flying out tomorrow morning to California to attend the funeral of my 18-year-old cousin. Thank you. Yeah. I've lived in Colorado for a while now. She lived a little bit further up in California than me, so I didn't do a lot of day-to-day life with her. But she stands out to me. I will probably always remember her as she was as a little girl. Very angelic, very reserved, always with a little bit of mischief in her eyes and a smile. Unfortunately, she had a lot of chaos externally. And I don't think that it's not comfortable to say, but she passed away due to an overdose. And I can't help but think just maybe how different things would have turned out had she been a little bit more aware, a little more secure in her identity, and knowing who she was, and knowing the power that her life could have had. So on the positive note, right, my why is, gosh, my parents made a lot of sacrifices so that I could be where I am. And on the other note, how much is really at stake in the lives of our kids. So I think that it's timely, that that I'm able to maybe share some words, some encouragement along the way as you guys fight for your kids staying down. So I think we're probably going to get started eating pretty soon, right? Or should I keep going? 5 more minutes. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about connecting with your children in order to cultivate their strengths, right? Last time that we were together, we talked about the different kinds of learning styles, how to really encourage that in your kids. But really, we can't get to that point unless we're really cultivating that connection and that awareness and that knowledge of who our children even are, right? We're going to just kind of be throwing things all over the place if we're not putting that investment into really knowing our kids. How many of you have more than one child? That's a lot of you. That's probably most of you. I am an aunt to 2 kids, to 2 little girls, and they're 5 and 7, and so I'm finally getting to that point where I'm like, wow, this is really hard to just spend time with both of you because you're both so different. You both want to do such different things, and I want to get to know you, especially being a long-distance aunt, Colorado to California. Whenever I'm with them, it's like, how do I maximize this time and really getting to know you? And I think that's super difficult, especially for, though I'm kind of relating to that now, for those of you who have more than one kiddo to really figure out what the keys are to their heart. I have started my presentation with two quotes of 2 very important women. One is St. Catherine of Siena, and the other is Dolly Parton. Amen. So St. Catherine of Siena, obviously, she's a woman of faith, said, be who God made you to be, and you will set the world on fire. I first heard that quote in the wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton, and I was just struck by that statement. I think all of us, including our children, have a deep question of significance, right? Always we're kind of wondering, like, what am I here for? What is the mark that I'm supposed to be making? And that quote just speaks so poignantly to the fact that all we need to be is who we're supposed to be. We are uniquely designed, we are uniquely brought forth into this world at this time in history for a specific reason, and that's just to be who we are. And if we're doing that unencumbered, we're going to make our mark in the world, we're going to make a difference to those around us, to our communities, and then that's really, there's a freedom to that, right? That's not striving to be like the person to the left or to the right of you, but just who you are supposed to be. And it's really important in this journey to figure out who they are supposed to be and not just who we want them to be or who we think they should be, right? The other quote is from Dolly Parton that says, find out who you are and do it on purpose. And so I think those 2 go really well together because again, it's about finding out who really are you supposed to be, and then just take that by the horns and walk into that with boldness. I think that's a journey I'm still on, and yet what a delight and what a privilege it is to have parents who are not only thinking through that for themselves and walking through their own self-awareness and continual education, but then thinking through, how do I help my child also walk in that and be aware of that? So there's a couple of words that I have on your handouts. The first is cultivate, and then affirm, and then facilitate, I think, because my notes went blank. Do we have an extra one of the handout? What does the word cultivate bring to mind?
Build or grow.
Build or grow. Nurture. Anybody else? Prepare. Farming. Yeah, whoever said farming, that's really good, right? It's about not just planting a seed, but setting up the conditions for that seed to really break through the ground and bear fruit. Making sure that the ground is fertile, making sure that the temperature is right, that they're getting enough sunlight, enough water. And so it's really helping to what's already there to keep growing and flourish. So I love that word, and that's, I think, where we can start in terms of knowing how we're going to how we can strengthen our kids. Thank you. So I read an article a while back, and it was actually like one of those relationship articles. I think it was Psychology Today, that was based on the study of this gentleman, Dr. John Gottman, and he's done a lot of research on relationships. I've listed on the back, I think, their website, or there's a handout somewhere that has the website where you could learn a little bit more. But he talked about the couples that were the strongest, the marriages that were the most joyful and resilient, were the ones where the partners responded to the emotional bids. What's a bid? You're going to put in a bid for building a house. An offer, a want, a request. So an emotional bid then is really a request. And a lot of times those emotional bids happen throughout the day without you even realizing it, right? There are people, some of your kids are going to be super verbal. They're going to be like, come play with me. But other kids are going to be maybe a little bit more subtle than that. But every time someone decides to share something with you, whether that's verbally or otherwise, that's really a request for connection. And we have an opportunity every time to either turn away from the person or turn towards the person. So that you can fill that out in there. When you are responding positively, you are turning toward the person when they have an emotional bid. And then if you're responding negatively, you're returning away. So if your child were to come up to you and say, hey, can we go outside? Can we go outside and play? What would be a way to turn towards the child in that moment? You guys can, how about we do this? Discuss it with your neighbor in front of you. What would be a way to respond positively to, let's go play outside? I love that. Right. That's awesome. Yeah, okay, I'm going to reiterate that. So the idea is to, if you are, as most of you probably will be, in the middle of a lot of things, it is just easy to be caught up in that task and be like, okay, I can't right now, I can't right now, I can't right now. And before you know it, the time and the moment could have passed. And so her idea was setting a timer for 5 or 10 minutes and saying, I would love to, but I only have 10 minutes. And then being able to prioritize the child. Another way, like turning towards and affirming and being positive isn't just saying yes, right? It's about that connection and acknowledging that child is really asking for connection with you and affirmation from you. So even if that is a no right now, to stop and be able to say, I would love to do that. I love playing with you. I have so much fun when we do that together. I can't right now, but how about we, and then, make plans for that future time of connection. Or like she was saying, it's a super great idea of just putting some time on it, because what was the last thing you said? Either there is more time than we think there is, or what we thought needed to get done didn't probably actually have to get done. Yes, you had a comment.
One that I do with my daughter when she wants to play, especially in the morning. I'm not a morning person, and my daughter knows I'm not a morning person. So she'll see me going to the kitchen to get my actual cup of coffee, and she's like, Mommy, I want to make you your coffee. And I'm like, okay. She'll go down, she has this little wooden coffee maker. She's like, here, I'm going to go make you your coffee. So I'll sit there drinking my actual coffee, but I'll take her cup.
Yes.
And pretend. I'll put it right next to my actual cup and just be like, oh, that's the greatest coffee ever.
That's awesome. Okay, so incorporating play into your everyday, right? So her daughter knows she's not a morning person. Coffee is the first thing on the to-do list. And so her daughter says she wants to make her coffee. She has a little station where she makes a pretend cup of coffee, brings it to her mom, and she's engaging with her daughter, drinking her actual cup of coffee while she drinks the pretend cup. And I think that's what it's really about, right? We don't, especially when you've got 5 kiddos, you've got 2 kiddos, you've got schedules and different schools and all of that. It's not this like dream, right, where you can really just set aside that time all the time to spend the quality time that we wish we could share with our kids, but incorporating that into your everyday. The key thing about turning towards someone is acknowledging who they are, acknowledging that they are important and they matter, and that their silly thing, whether it's telling you the dream that they had, I don't know if there's anything crazier than listening to a little kid's dream in the morning. But affirming that they are significant and what matters to them matters to you, even if you don't have time to fully engage that. Another emotional bid, though, may just be commenting on something, right? So if I say, "Oh my gosh, look at that sunset, it's so gorgeous," and my friend that I'm walking with and shared that with ignores me or is like, "Meh, I've seen better," or whatever. Like, the point isn't really about the sunset. The point is I'm admiring this beautiful thing and I'm wanting to connect with you and share my joy with you. And so kiddos will be doing the same thing, whether it's a thing about Paw Patrol or the action figure or what's the new game that everyone's into? Fortnite, see? In stereo. Especially that stuff that just goes over my head, but really wanting to connect with them is a way to turn towards. And again, the opposite of that would be turning away, ignoring them. I know that life is life, and I'm trying to suspend judgment, but it breaks my heart when I'm at Target and you hear little kiddos talking to their parents, sometimes saying the darndest, cutest things, sharing about whatnot. They saw this, they saw that, mama, 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 mama. And of course, you're in the zone, you're doing things, you're shopping, you're paying. But those are the moments where you have that opportunity to really connect and affirm your child's significance and importance to you, even if it's, "Can you tell me about that when we get in the car?" And of course, most of the time, this is not going to be a perfect practice, but if that's the intention, I think you'll be depositing in what Dr. Gottman calls the emotional bank. You'll be depositing that affirmation and really creating this relational capital that will go the distance when they're in their teens and adulthood. That's where those relationships are forged, in a lot of those small moments. So in one of your sheets, I have linked, or I've put the website for learning more about Dr. Gottman's research. He also has these little flashcards that you can use. I've never used them, but I noticed that they were a resource available where you can kind of dive deeper into some of those emotional connections with your kids or with your spouse. So if that's of interest to you, you can look at it. There's an emotional bid for a bottle of milk right now over here. So I've seen it said, and I think it's 100% true, I'm really into all things like love languages and Myers-Briggs and kind of all that personality and strength stuff. But I really think that when it comes to children and even grumpy adolescents, that children spell love T-I-M-E. Time is so fleeting with your kids. Really, I think these days by the age of 10, I feel like they're already know so much. They're already such independent little people. And so that time that you take to really be intentional with them is really what starts to affirm and speak truth into your child's life, that they are valuable, that they have something to bring to the world, that they're unique and precious and unduplicated in the world. So the next thing is cultivating, So when I worked at the farm, I had 8 girls or 8 boys, depending on what day I was working at a time. And it was a very structured place because they were there for behavior modification. And so there was not a lot that I could really do to steer away from the day-to-day agenda. But one of the things that I liked to do when I had a chance was to at least wake up one of the girls, now they're teens, so that was a little bit harder. I know little kids love waking up early, but to just wake them up a little bit before breakfast, make a cup of tea with them, and just sit and start the day with them one-on-one. That was a way that I found that I could steal, even if it was 15 minutes, and say, I want to have undivided time with just you, and create just a little bit of memory with them. Another thing I think is, I know it goes slower, but just incorporating that quality time in your day-to-day. I think date errands are really, really cool, and you can bring 1 or 2 kids with you to go to the dry cleaners, to go to the grocery store. Yes, they slow things down, but really finding those ways to incorporate them into your day-to-day activity, but making them know, like, I want to go with you, and we're gonna just, even if we're gonna stop at McDonald's and get an ice cream, to make it a little bit more special. Those I've found have been really ways to kind of bake that intentional time into your day-to-day when you can't really set aside the time to have a big old, date day or Saturday. The other, I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, but the other stint that I had kind of in child rearing is I came alongside my aunt and homeschooled I had 7 cousins, 6 of them were school age, so from 2 months to 17. So that was another time where I got to practice the whole, let's go to McDonald's and grab a smoothie on the way to changing the oil in the car. Really special. It was just a year, and now the kindergartner is 13, 14. So I wouldn't have thought that just the amount of memories and connection that all these years later, now that they're teenagers, the oldest is married and has 2 kids, has yielded from that season. So the other note that I had written here was seize the moment and ask questions along the way. How many of you are incorporating questions with your kid? I mean, I know how often it is the default, like, how was your day? How was school? And it gets to the point where the kid's like, fine, what did you do? Nothing, So really, I think if even tonight before you leave, you brainstorm some zany questions or different questions that you can be asking of your kids as you are just going through the routine of life with them. I guess I will show this as to exemplify. So my nieces, like I told you, they're young, and so the other point I have is to cultivate curiosity and wonder. I put a note to myself down, and then I realized that actually a few people have written about this, but I was calling it the virtue of boredom. I heard someone say recently that wonder is going extinct. I know that I don't wonder very much anymore, right? I wonder who invented X. And then within seconds, I'm Googling it, and I know, and I haven't spent that time ruminating or imagining or thinking because I have the answer to what I'm looking for. And so in order to have educational, or kids who are lifelong learners, and kids who are curious about the world and who are investigating, and that's how you're going to discover your strengths, right? Is as they are wondering and being curious. And it's so easy to not be curious because it's entertainment at every level. And I'm struggling with that in my adult life. My parents we didn't have a TV in my home till we were like 12. And so there was a lot of playing outside, this is just a little rabbit trail. I was the oldest sister of brothers, and I had a lot of power in the whole playing situation. So So Cowboys and Indians, I found it very ghastly that there were no women folk. So I made tiny paper dolls to go alongside of them, and they were married and they had children, and it went from war zone to family playing house. My brothers were thrilled. We had Legos. There was a war between the Legos and the Playmobil, and I somehow managed a peace treaty. Again, I was really really ruined all of my brother's games. But I think that part of that is having that imagination, right? When you're not just on a tablet or watching TV all the time, you have that space to really think through new games and new ideas. So I'm struggling with myself. I'm thinking of imposing like a no TV Tuesday or a no something screen time hours or screen time zones, because our entertainment is with us at all times. Now, I think that God bless the little minivans with the cartoonies in the back, because their road trips have been made possible without World War III breaking out. So obviously there's within reason, right? But I do think that we need to create space for boredom and being like, it's okay for you to be bored and frustrated and have to figure out what you want to do with that time. There will be a quiz. Okay, so I think I'm going to play when it comes to questions, I had this little moment with my niece where I was just I just started interviewing her, and it was really fun to learn things about her.
Okay, tell me about one place you would love to go and explore. The park and the beach. Okay. Where is the favorite place?
It's on Griffin's mouth.
You're a good mom. Okay. Have you ever been somewhere where you were like, I can't believe this place is for real? I thought it was only in my imagination.
And the teacup ride
Ooh, the teacup ride.
and Disneyland.
That was pretty fun and cool. That's awesome.
The teacup ride was something she thought only existed in her imagination. And I just was recording as we talked, and I'm sure we'll treasure that in the future. But this is a little girl who doesn't normally just share, who's a little bit speech delayed. And so just to ask her off the wall questions and go with her silliness, I think led me to learn things about her that I didn't know she was even processing. Things about her parents, things about even health things that I didn't know she was struggling with because of just asking silly questions. And so the power of conversation with your kids, even at a young age, is super powerful for connection. Back to my actual notes. I know that we're running out of time. So the other thing is to use questions, like I said, to instill a sense of wonder, answering a question with a question, so you can kind of get that ball rolling. So if they're like, why did this happen? Why do you think it happened? Or who did this? Well, who do you think did that? You know, really being able to just engage their thinking. When I did some literacy work in Southern California, that was the same thing in reading, right? Before you even read, start to ask them, hey, what do you think is going to happen in this story based on this picture? And really taking the time to dive deep with them and start making them think along the way and spark that imagination and the attention span. When I'm reading a book, and this also can translate to kids watching movies or whatnot, but asking them about what characters that they identify with, who would they want to be friends with, why do you think that happened, have you ever seen someone feel that way or experience that way, building those opportunities to know what's going on in the heart and minds of your kids. The other thing that I have is play, which we've talked about already. I just brought one example. This game is silly. It's called Who Knew? Has anyone played it? So what it is, and I was going to have us do it, but there's a lot of you, and we're running out of time. But basically, it's kind of like apples to apples, but instead, everyone gives someone what they think would be their favorite thing, right? So, I'll open it real quick. So we've got roller coasters, t-shirts, riding the bus, ketchup, ballet. So everyone who's playing the game would give them what they think that person might like best. And then that person gets to rank them. And then whoever, got the best thing gets the most points, and on and on. It's silly. You guys can modify that as a family and do different things, but it's a way to, again, know what your kid is into, and also it's a way to make your kid feel known when everyone puts down similar things and it's hard for them to pick. I also put on the resources just some other games that I think are good for connection and knowing each other. And then the last one is affirm. Not the last one, second to last one. I I think it's super important to speak identity into your children and affirming who they are and not just what they do. I'm going to say it again. It's important to affirm who they are and not just what they do, right? Because today in age, I mean, maybe it's always, maybe it's just the human condition. It's so easy to believe the lies that we are, what we do, that our worth is based on how right we get it, how wrong we get it. If anyone has not read You Are Special by Max Lucado, pick it up. It is so good. It's this little story about a society where people put dots on you if they think you're bad and stars on you if you think you're good, and how those things stick and then start kind of creating that cycle in your head. And then he gets magical and nothing sticks to him. So, good book. But it stayed in my head. I was on a road trip, met some friends who I hadn't seen since college, and they had since had a brood of children, and I spent the night, woke up in the morning, met them down in the kitchen for breakfast, and my friend introduced her children to me. Well, first she introduced me to them, and she's like, this is how she knows mommy and daddy, whatnot. And then she introduced her children to me this way, and she said, Yvette, this is our daughter, Caroline. She's in the 2nd grade. She is very cheerful. She helps me out so much, and she is really loving roller skates. And she did some other things about character. She's very generous, caring, and kind to her siblings. And then she went on and she did that for each of her children. The way that they perked up as their mom introduced them to me has stayed with me these 12, 15 years later. Because she was affirming the character that was good and probably something that we want for all of our kids, but also the things that were unique to each child and speaking an identity to them. We also have an opportunity to do this when our kid is doing something for us, right? Hey, can you grab that diaper for mom? Okay, thanks. But when you are able to say, that was really helpful, thank you for doing this. Can you share that? Thank you for being generous with your brother and sister. Thank you for being kind. Thank you for being compassionate to the neighbor kid who was having a hard day, instead of just the action of, thanks for doing X, or that was a really good job doing X, right? Affirming who they are and not what they do. There's a fine line, but I think if you're taking that time to make that difference with them, it's gonna speak volumes to that performance mentality of, I've just gotta strive and be X, Y, Z, because that's what's expected of me, instead of being like, no, this is who you are, this is who you are at your best. You're not always gonna get there, but I'm gonna cultivate and speak it into existence because I see it in you. And we can just do that for each other in general. The other thing is delight-directed learning, which is a big deal in homeschooling. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of it. Basically, it's where a child is able to kind of explore their passions and then learn everything about that. So if they're into airplanes, they get to learn about the history of airplanes. They get to learn about the dynamics of airplanes. They get to learn about design and historical figures and tragic events, whatever, but use that delight to be the entryway to really learn about a gamut of things. I really want to challenge the notion for those of you who do have kids in a school environment every day, that we really start pushing our children toward being educated and not just going to school, right? We need to broaden the idea that education isn't something that you go and check the box and it's done, that you have to be lifelong learners. And the people who are going to be able to innovate and be really powerful in their industries are people who are lifelong learners, who are chasing after self-fulfillment and becoming really robust people, emotionally, relationally, as well as academically, but people who really know because they are passionate about something, right? And so there are resources out there. I would encourage you to look through some of there's book clubs or book curriculums that you could do on the weekends or over the summer, or if your kid is into something, let them dive into it and use that as the gateway to learn about other things around the world. My little brother was very much that person, so trips to the library would come back from Jewish history. This little Mexican kid in LA really was into Israel, and he would come back with just all kinds of interesting things about the conflicts and the symbols, and just really interesting but cute, and it led to other things, right? Other passions in history. So the other part of delight-driven education or learning is parent-facilitated. Obviously, it's not just, hey, go read about Fortnite all day long, but being that involved and engaged and figuring out how to supplement that delight so that they can really keep kind of fanning the flames towards it. And so I put here, parent becomes a student of his or her child, and they affirm and encourage their passions, pay attention to their questions, as well as their distractions. So a lot of times what a child is distracted by, right, is going to also give you a key into what their interests are and what their passions are. The last thing is to facilitate. And I wrote, become your child's advocate and patron. So back in the day, right, there used to be a patron behind an artist, and we're going to sponsor you to be this lifelong artist or this musician or whatnot. But for the parent to become the advocate and the sponsor, let's say, to their child's interest, set fire to their inclinations and let them learn and explore. I just have a bullet point of lists, and I'm sure you guys can kind of brainstorm along with me. When you are connecting with your child, you're learning their interest, you're being able to then guide and navigate them in the sea of all the things that are vying for their attention, vying to speak their identity to them. I have another picture here that I forgot to show you guys earlier. I just saw this today and I said, can I use this? So this is my friend and her daughter, who is now a teenager, and they just did 2019 vision boards together. And I think, what a way for an adult, for a mom to connect with her adolescent child, right? Obviously, maybe this is more of a girl thing, but I'm like, how passionate, how awesome is that to dream together? And how are you not going to learn what is going on with your child's heart and their passion and their influences and the things that they want to be if you're not doing this kind of activity together? And then facilitating. So as you heard earlier, I was sharing how, my parents made sacrifices to be able to afford the education that we had. And all of you are here because you're making sacrifices to afford your kids education or supplemental experiences to really help them dig deeper and fulfill their potential. But it doesn't always have to cost money to be able to do that. Yes, classes are great, and music lessons and ballet and all of those things are great, but those things can also take on a life and a demand of their own. And so here are some of the things that I have ideas on how to facilitate these passions in your kids. The library, obviously, being able to just let them loose and see what they're interested in, what they want to check out, keeping tabs of all those books and not getting book fines. But that's a free resource. Huh? They don't do fines anymore?
FYI, for all you parents, no more fines.
No more fines.
Well, for kids.
For kids. No more fines for kids.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
That's collections, that's like the fine. No more fines.
That's awesome. Classes, obviously. Sports, hikes. And then I want to highlight volunteerism. There are so many opportunities that you can have and have access to when you show up as a volunteer with your family. My poor little brother got dragged, voluntold, not volunteer, right? He got dragged to so many things. I used to work with formerly incarcerated folks, and I would take him to work with me, and he would make calls, and he was open, his experiences were open to folks experiencing homelessness, folks who were struggling to reincorporate into life after incarceration. And then there's also fun things. There's conventions, and there's all kinds of other things that you can volunteer for, concert events and venues. Those things are ways to kind of cultivate that help your kids build a network, especially as they're getting into the high school age, to start building some of those people skills, work skills, and then opening their eyes to what else is there. My parents used to take us, but we were really excited about it actually. They used to do Sunday school in church, and there was a big Sunday school convention every year in California in the Disneyland Hotel. And so we got to go, and our favorite thing, of course, was checking out all the booths and getting free things. But that also opened our eyes to there's a whole big industry of people who are writing books about this and whatnot. So volunteerism is a huge way to do stuff for free and get access to really cool things without having to pay for it. The other thing is bartering. My mom asked if she could clean the offices of the piano school so that I could have lessons, right? It's outside of the box. But that's how we afforded it. And of course, I was gonna feel a lot more committed knowing that that was what my mom was doing so that I could have that opportunity. The other thing are there's day workshops. So I couldn't do, she put me in ice skating for 4 weeks. That's all. My ice skating dreams only lasted 4 weeks. And I was really sad about that. But in hindsight, I think 4 weeks of having an experience that an urban girl doesn't normally have, right? And that was a really neat thing for me as a child, even though it was short. Also, I went to a calligraphy class for 1 day. It was just a workshop. But those are things that start cultivating that curiosity, giving your kids a little bit outside the box experiences. You had a question?
4-H.
4-H.
There's a lot there, and then they also encourage parents to work with their children.
Yeah.
To projects, and then they can present them at the fair.
That's awesome. 4-H, parent engagement, kids start learning those skills about, I mean, especially if your kids are animal lovers, right? To give them some commitment and guidance and how to do that. I would have loved that. It wasn't until high school that I volunteered for a summer camp and got to work with horses and whatnot. Again, didn't make a lot of money, but it was an opportunity to kind of experience that. Yes? Can you say that louder?
There's free classes for kids at the Home Depot once a month.
Yes, Home Depot is building workshops once a month, free classes. I'm sure that if we let you guys talk, you can kind of share what some of those resources are to really take advantage of. The other thing I was going to say is family leadership, of just affirming even within your own family, the giftings that you start seeing in your kid, being like, hey, can you sing a song before dinner? Can you be the one to teach your brother how to tie his shoes? Just calling out those things and giving them a role even within your own family will start building some of that leadership and those strengths. And bonding, yes. Sorry, my notes disappeared for a second. So while I find them, does anyone else have ideas about things that they can do to kind of broaden the learning and setting those passions on fire for your kids?
I think in the discussion piece, I think kids absolutely love stories about when you were in second grade,
Yes.
you were in fifth grade, and you were in high school.
Yes.
I think I love my dad's crazy stories.
Yeah.
I tell my kids tons of stories, and they tell their friends the stories of when I was a kid. And I think that whole getting to know your kid is partly them really getting to know you, that you struggle with
Yes.
things, that you weren't good at things, that, all that stuff. So
100%. So I'm going to repeat it for everyone. Storytelling is so important in terms of connecting with your kid, not just asking them and learning them, but also being vulnerable with them and sharing with them your stories from childhood. Or when I was this age, I had, I experienced this, and then telling them about their grandparents, and then they tell their friends and whatnot, and kind of creating, not only does it create connection with you, I also think it hits on that identity piece of being like, this is who I come from, right? So as a sort of 1.5 generations in, my parents immigrated when they were young. I love hearing the stories of what it was like in Mexico, the opportunities that we have in this country, why they came, just how different things were there. It really speaks to my identity and the opportunities that have been given to me and the sacrifices that were made for me to be able to chase after my dreams and do more. So anyway, we've run out of time. I'm going to leave some questions here. Another question I would ask, or just even your high schoolers or older, that was really pivotal for me was, what makes your heart come alive? So as they're learning and experiencing different things, for them to take note of, when did their heart come alive? Did they hear about an injustice that made them go, I want to do something different about that? And keep those notes. The other thing, I know I'm out of time, Josh, I probably wasn't wrapping up, is letter writing, even if it's just a note on your phone. I wrote a little thing on Facebook about my cousin the other day, and I was like, man, I wish I had just sent that to her. It was just a little paragraph of a sketch of, this is how I see you. My grandmother wrote a letter to my mom, and there's like 3 sentences in it about me as an 8-year-old. To know that my grandmother, who passed away when I was 11, saw me at 8 years old, and the things that she spoke in those 3 sentences, I hold it so close. So I encourage you to pause, write a note, write a description, pick some words or adjectives that you can speak identity into your kids, and that is how they will start leaning in to their strengths. So I am sorry that we're out of time. I've loved so much talking with you guys. Wish we could have dialogued more, but I'll be around for a little bit afterwards if you guys want to chat. Thank you so much.